In a small, quiet town surrounded by rolling hills and narrow streets, there was a girl whom everyone called the Wild Alien. She was not really an alien, of course, but her unusual ways made people whisper about her. She moved differently, spoke differently, and wore clothes that looked like they came from another world. Children avoided her on the playground. Neighbors crossed the street when she walked by, and teachers struggled to understand her. But the girl did not notice most of this. She was too busy noticing the world in ways no one else could see. Her real name was Lila, but it hardly mattered. Names were something ordinary people used to organize life into neat boxes, and Lila never fit into a box. She lived in a small old house on the edge of town, where the walls creaked and the windows let in the soft golden sunlight in the mornings. Her parents were kind but busy, and they didn't always understand her restless spirit. Lila liked to wander in the fields, climb the highest trees, and watch the clouds as if they held messages just for her. At school, things were different. Lila never sat quietly in her chair. Sometimes she would tap her fingers on the desk. Sometimes she would hum a tune no one else could hear. She drew pictures in her notebook, strange creatures, flying cities, and endless forests, but no one seemed to care. "She's weird," the other children said. "She doesn't belong." Lila had learned long ago that trying to fit in only made her feel smaller, so she stopped trying. She became invisible to most, except in the whispers and glances that followed her down the hallways. Even her teachers had trouble understanding her. Some called her distracted, others called her stubborn. One teacher once said, "She needs to learn how to follow the rules." But Lila had rules of her own, rules made from curiosity, imagination, and the way her mind wandered to places no one else could see. If she wanted to talk about a cloud shaped like a dragon during math class, she would. If she wanted to climb a tree instead of writing her essay, she might. These small acts, harmless to her, were often seen as a problem by the adults around her. Lila's closest friend was the wind. She felt it swirl around her, whispering secrets from faraway places. She talked to it sometimes as if it could answer back, and in a way it did. When the wind blew through the branches of the old oak tree she liked to climb, she felt comforted, as though someone understood her without judging. She also loved the animals in the fields, the birds, the rabbits, and even the insects. They didn't care if she looked different or if she spoke differently. With them, she felt accepted. Despite her isolation, Lila was not unhappy. There was a strange kind of freedom in being alone. She could explore every hidden corner of the town, imagine fantastic worlds, and dream without limits. But sometimes when she watched other children laughing together, a quiet ache would rise in her chest. She wondered what it would be like to have someone notice her in a kind way, not in a whisper or a laugh behind her back. A small hope flickered inside her heart even though she tried to ignore it. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Lila wandered farther than usual. She found a small pond hidden behind a thicket of trees. The water was clear and calm, reflecting the sky in soft blues and pinks. She sat on a flat rock at the edge of the pond and dipped her fingers in the cool water. It was peaceful here, and for a moment she felt as if the world outside did not exist at all. She listened to the quiet splash of water and the soft rustle of leaves, imagining herself in a place where no one could judge her, where she could be free to be herself. But even in her sanctuary, Lila could not escape the feeling of being different. She thought about the day at school when a boy had thrown his pencil at her, just because she had answered a question in a way the teacher did not expect. She remembered the girl who refused to share her lunch, saying, "You're strange, we don't want to sit with you." The memories stung, but she had learned to let them pass like clouds in the sky. Still, a part of her longed for someone to understand her, someone who would raise a hand not to mock but to reach out. As she sat by the pond, a small frog hopped onto a lily pad nearby. Lila laughed quietly, feeling the simplicity of the moment. The frog did not judge her. The frog did not care that she was wild or alien. It just existed, and in its presence Lila felt a sense of connection. She realized that even if the world did not notice her yet, there were always small signs of life that accepted her as she was. It was not much, but it was enough to give her courage to keep going. That evening, as Lila walked back home through the empty streets, she noticed the golden light of the setting sun reflecting on the rooftops. She imagined herself as part of that light, moving freely across the town, untouchable by the whispers and judgment. She knew the world was not ready for her, not yet. But she also knew she had a spark inside her that no one could take away. And so, Lila continued her life as the wild alien girl, misunderstood, overlooked, and alone in many ways. But she carried within her a small hope, fragile yet persistent, that one day someone would see her, truly see her, and not with fear or judgment, but with kindness. Until that day came, she would keep exploring, imagining and dreaming, finding beauty and connection in the world around her, even if it was in places others did not notice. In her heart, Lila held a quiet promise. She would never let the world's ignorance dim her spirit. And somewhere in the near future, that promise would meet a hand that would reach out to her, changing everything she thought she knew about herself and the world. The next morning, the town awoke to a pale sun that filtered through the thin clouds. Lila walked to school with her usual quiet steps, her backpack swinging lightly against her back. She felt the familiar weight of solitude, the looks and whispers from people who did not understand her. Most of the children ignored her entirely, while a few would exchange quick glances and snickers. But Lila had learned to navigate their indifference. She had learned to exist in a world that seemed unwilling to see her. That day, however, something felt different. In her first class, a new student had arrived. His name was Ethan, and he was unlike anyone Lila had ever met. While others stared at her with curiosity or judgment, Ethan seemed calm and unbothered. He walked into the room carrying a notebook and a small bag and took a seat near the back. His eyes, warm and steady, scanned the room with quiet interest, not disdain. As the teacher began speaking about a new lesson in science, Lila noticed Ethan glancing at her. He didn't whisper with the others or roll his eyes at her strange gestures. Instead, he gave her a small nod as if to say, "I see you." Lila's heart skipped a beat. It was such a simple gesture, yet it felt monumental. For the first time in a long while, someone acknowledged her presence without judgment. Throughout the morning, Lila found herself stealing glances at Ethan. He was attentive yet relaxed, asking questions and making small observations that no one else seemed to notice. When the teacher asked a difficult question about the solar system, Lila's hand went up automatically, as it often did, despite the skeptical looks from her classmates. Ethan smiled at her from across the room, a quiet encouragement that made her feel bold. For once, answering a question felt safe, even exciting. During lunch, Lila hesitated near the crowded cafeteria. She usually ate alone, sitting on a corner bench and watching the laughter and chatter from afar. But today, Ethan approached her. He carried his tray and offered her a small smile. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked gently. Lila was surprised but didn't shake her head. He sat down, placing his tray beside hers. They began talking, carefully at first, sharing small pieces of themselves. Lila told him about her favorite trees near the edge of town and the secret pond where the water reflected the sky. Ethan listened with fascination, asking questions and making thoughtful comments. No one had ever listened to her like this before. His attention was not mocking or curious in a cruel way. It was sincere, patient, and kind. "You see things differently," Ethan said, his voice calm and steady. "I think that's amazing." Lila blinked, unsure how to respond. Most people thought she was strange or odd. Hearing someone call her perspective amazing felt like sunlight warming her chest. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like an outsider. The days that followed were filled with small, meaningful moments. Ethan continued to sit with her at lunch, ask about her drawings, and encourage her to share ideas in class. He didn't try to change her. He simply offered friendship and understanding. Slowly, Lila began to trust him. She started speaking up more in class, not to impress anyone, but because she realized her voice mattered to someone. One afternoon during art class, the teacher assigned a drawing of a landscape. Lila usually kept her creations hidden, knowing that others would not appreciate the way her imagination shaped the world. But this time, Ethan leaned over and said quietly, "I'd love to see what you make." That simple request made Lila pick up her pencil with excitement rather than fear. She sketched a sprawling forest with mountains in the distance, strange creatures peeking from behind the trees, and a river that sparkled like liquid glass. When she finished, she hesitated, unsure if anyone would care. Ethan looked at her drawing, eyes wide with admiration. "This is incredible," he said. "You really see the world in a way I never could." Lila felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, her uniqueness felt like a gift rather than a burden. She realized that one human had truly seen her, not the wild alien, Not the girl who didn't fit in, but her. And that recognition was changing everything inside her. The other students began to notice the change too. Some still whispered and stared, but their words no longer held the power they once had. Lila walked with a quiet confidence, strengthened by the knowledge that Ethan valued her. She still had moments of doubt, moments when the past isolation pressed against her like a heavy fog. But those moments were shorter, less frightening. One rainy afternoon, Lila and Ethan walked home together from school. The streets were empty, and the soft patter of rain on the rooftops created a gentle rhythm. Ethan carried a small umbrella and held it over both of them. Lila glanced at him, feeling a mixture of gratitude and wonder. No one had ever done something so simple, so caring, without expecting anything in return. "You're different," Ethan said softly, looking at her with honest eyes. "But that's why I like talking to you." Lila smiled, a shy but genuine smile. She had spent so long feeling like her differences were weaknesses. Now she realized they could be strengths, especially when someone saw their value. The wild alien girl was no longer invisible, at least not to one human who chose to see her fully. That evening, as she sat by her bedroom window watching the rain, Lila thought about the simple acts that had begun to change her life. A nod in class, a shared lunch, a kind word, a raised hand that reached out to her. They were small moments, but together they created something larger. Hope. Hope that she could be accepted. Hope that she could connect. Hope that someone could see her for who she truly was. For the first time in a long while, Lila dreamed of the future with more than just imagination. She imagined exploring new ideas, sharing her thoughts openly, and walking through the town without the heavy weight of solitude pressing against her. She imagined a world where being different was not a curse, but a gift, and someone had shown her that this world was possible. As the rain softened and the sky cleared, Lila felt a sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement for the days ahead. She knew challenges would come, whispers, misunderstandings, and the occasional sting of rejection. But now she had something stronger than fear: connection. Someone had raised a hand to reach out, and it had changed everything. Lila closed her eyes and whispered to herself, a secret promise. "I will not be afraid to be myself anymore. Someone has seen me, and that is enough to start." And in that moment, the wild alien girl felt, perhaps for the first time, that the world was not entirely against her. A single human had noticed her, and it was the beginning of a life she had never dared to imagine, a life where she might finally belong. Part 3. Struggle and Growth. The days after Ethan first reached out were full of small victories and new experiences for Lila. She began to notice how much the world could change when someone saw her for who she truly was. Yet she also realized that change did not happen instantly. Old habits, doubts, and the quiet whispers of others still tried to pull her back into the shadows. At school, Lila's classmates had started to notice her new confidence. Some were curious, some were skeptical, and some, unfortunately, still treated her differently. But Lila no longer avoided them completely. With Ethan by her side, she learned to face the world gently, without pretending to be someone she was not. She began participating in class discussions more often, offering ideas and answers, her voice calm but clear. It felt strange at first, the sound of her own voice speaking and being heard, but she soon realized it was a powerful feeling. One morning, the teacher assigned a group project in history. Lila was nervous. Being part of a team usually meant judgment, teasing, or exclusion. But Ethan volunteered to work with her, smiling as he said, "We'll figure it out together." Lila felt a mixture of relief and hope. With him beside her, the challenge seemed possible. As they worked, they faced small obstacles. Some students doubted Lila's abilities, whispering, "She'll probably ruin the project." Lila felt the familiar sting of old fears creeping in. She wanted to retreat, to hide, but Ethan's calm presence reminded her that she could handle this. He encouraged her gently, saying, "Just share what you know. Your ideas are good. Trust yourself." His faith in her helped Lila push past the nervousness that had always held her back. Together they researched, wrote, and prepared a presentation. Lila discovered she had skills she never knew she possessed. She could organize ideas, notice small details, and explain concepts in ways others found clear and interesting. For the first time, she felt capable, not just different. When the day of the presentation arrived, Lila's heart raced. She looked at the faces in the classroom, expecting whispers or laughter. But as she spoke carefully and with Ethan supporting her, she noticed nods, smiles, and genuine attention. It was a small triumph, but it meant the world to her. She realized that her uniqueness was not a weakness. It was a strength when shared in the right way. And while not everyone accepted her, a few people began to notice and respect her ideas. Lila felt something new, a sense of belonging, even if it was only partial. Outside school life was not always easy. Her parents, though loving, struggled to understand her completely. They worried she was too different, too sensitive, too wild. Lila often felt caught between her inner world and the expectations of those around her. But she learned to communicate her feelings more openly. She shared small victories with her parents, moments of courage or creativity, and slowly they began to see her in a new light. Ethan remained a constant presence in her life. After school, they explored the town together, discovering hidden corners, quiet parks, and forgotten streets. He encouraged Lila to try new things, drawing in public spaces, sharing her ideas with a small group, even reading her favorite stories aloud. Each small act of courage built her confidence. She began to see that the world was not as frightening as it once seemed. One afternoon, they visited the pond where Lila often went alone. The water shimmered in the sunlight, and for a moment it felt like her secret world had opened to someone else. She told Ethan about the creatures she imagined living in the forests, the secret messages she believed clouds carried, and the stories she created in her mind. Ethan listened, genuinely fascinated, never judging or laughing. "You have such an incredible imagination," he said. "I've never met anyone who thinks the way you do. It's amazing." Lila smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Words like these were rare, but they were powerful. They reminded her that her differences were not mistakes, but gifts. Gifts that could be shared, appreciated, and celebrated. Despite these successes, challenges still appeared. Some students continued to tease her quietly, and sometimes the weight of years of isolation returned in sudden, sharp pangs of doubt. Lila would question herself, wondering if she truly belonged anywhere. But each time she remembered Ethan's belief in her. Each time she remembered the small victories she had achieved, the presentation, the drawings, the moments when she dared to speak up. Slowly, she learned to face her fears rather than run from them. One particularly difficult day, a rumor spread about Lila's strange habits. A group of students laughed and pointed at her during lunch. Lila's first instinct was to shrink back, as she always had. But then she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Ethan, steady and firm. "Ignore them," he said softly. "They don't see you." "I do." Those simple words gave Lila courage. She lifted her head, looked at the students, and walked away with dignity. She did not fight or argue. She simply continued on her path, supported by someone who truly understood her. That moment became a turning point. Lila realized she could face judgment and still remain herself. She could live fully even in a world that sometimes misunderstood her. In the weeks that followed, Lila experimented with her freedom. She shared her ideas more openly in class, drew larger and more imaginative sketches, and even helped younger students understand difficult lessons. Each act of courage, no matter how small, built her self-esteem. The world no longer felt entirely hostile. It was a place where she could grow, explore, and find connections. Lila also began to notice changes in herself. She was more patient, more confident, and more willing to take risks. She laughed more freely, spoke more openly, and allowed herself to dream bigger dreams. Her mind, once consumed with worry about judgment, now focused on possibilities and on friendships, creativity, and adventure. And through it all, Ethan remained by her side, a quiet guide, a steady friend, and the first person who had truly seen her. He never tried to change her or make her conform. He simply offered kindness, encouragement, and belief in her abilities. And in doing so, he had sparked a transformation in Lila that nothing else could have achieved. By the end of the term, Lila had become more visible to the world, not as a wild alien, but as a girl with remarkable creativity, intelligence, and courage. Some students still whispered, and some adults still worried, but Lila no longer feared them. She had learned to walk confidently, knowing that her uniqueness was not a weakness, and that one human's belief in her had begun to change everything. As she sat by her bedroom window that night, Lila reflected on her journey so far. She realized that life was full of challenges, but also full of small acts of kindness and understanding. The world might not fully accept her yet, but she had learned that even small gestures could create powerful change. And for the first time, she believed that her life could be filled with friendship, adventure, and acceptance. For Lila, the journey had only just begun. She knew the road ahead would have obstacles, but with courage, imagination, and a hand held out in friendship, she was ready to face whatever came next. Spring arrived in the town with a gentle warmth, painting the streets and fields in soft greens and bright blooms. For Lila, the season felt like a new beginning. She walked to school each morning with a quiet confidence, her head held a little higher than before. The small victories she had achieved over the past months had built her courage, and with Ethan by her side, she began to see herself in a new light. One morning, the teacher announced a school-wide art competition. Lila's heart skipped a beat. She had always loved drawing, but entering a competition felt daring. Memories of past ridicule crept in, and she hesitated. But then she remembered Ethan's encouraging words. "Your imagination is amazing. Don't be afraid to show it." His belief in her gave her the courage to try. Lila spent the next few weeks pouring her thoughts, dreams, and creativity into her artwork. She sketched a world unlike any other. Floating islands, forests that glowed at night, creatures with wings of every color, and rivers that sparkled like diamonds. Every detail reflected her imagination, her hopes, and her vision of a world where differences were celebrated. For Lila, this drawing was more than a project. It was a statement of who she truly was. When the day of the competition arrived, Lila felt a familiar nervousness. She carried her drawing carefully into the school hall, where students and teachers had gathered. For a moment she froze, expecting the usual stares or laughter, but instead she noticed something she had rarely experienced: people looking at her work with genuine curiosity and admiration. The judges examined each piece, whispering among themselves, and when they reached Lila's drawing, they paused. They looked at the intricate details, the vibrant colors, and the imaginative world she had created. One of the teachers smiled and said, "This is extraordinary. The imagination here is incredible." Lila felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, her creativity was not just seen, it was appreciated. And when Ethan appeared beside her, giving her a small, proud smile, she felt a surge of joy. His support had been a guiding light, and now the world, at least in part, was beginning to recognize her too. By the end of the day, Lila's artwork had won first place. The applause was loud, and for the first time, Lila stood in front of a crowd and felt pride rather than fear. She realized that being different was not a curse. It was a gift. Her imagination, her unique perspective, and her courage had created something beautiful. She had transformed from the wild alien girl who hid in the shadows into someone whose voice and vision could shine brightly. The recognition from the competition brought more than just a prize. It opened doors for friendships and understanding. Some students who had once ignored her approached to ask about her drawing, curious to learn more. Lila found herself sharing ideas, teaching small techniques, and connecting with others in ways she had never imagined possible. While not everyone embraced her immediately, the fear of judgment no longer controlled her actions. Even outside of school, Lila's life began to change. She explored the town with new eyes, noticing colors, shapes, and details she had never paid attention to before. She continued to visit her secret pond, but now she invited Ethan along. Together, they imagined stories about the creatures that lived there, planned small adventures, and laughed at the simple joys of life. Lila's world was no longer just her own. It was shared, filled with connection and understanding. At home, her parents noticed the change too. Lila spoke more openly about her experiences, her dreams, and her imagination. They began to see the courage and creativity that had always been there, waiting for recognition. Slowly, their worries about her being different were replaced with pride and admiration. For the first time, Lila felt fully accepted by her family, as well as by someone outside it. But transformation was not only about recognition, it was also about inner growth. Lila learned to embrace her emotions rather than fear them. She allowed herself to dream boldly, to express her thoughts openly, and to trust that she could handle setbacks with resilience. She discovered that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Each small act of bravery, From sharing a drawing to speaking in class reinforced her confidence and sense of self. One afternoon, Lila and Ethan sat on a hill overlooking the town. The sun was low, casting golden light over the rooftops and fields. Lila felt a deep sense of gratitude. She looked at Ethan and said, "You know, I don't think I would have ever tried if you hadn't been there. You saw me when no one else did." Ethan smiled, his eyes warm. "You always had it in you, Lila. I just helped you believe it yourself." That moment captured the essence of her transformation. Lila had not changed because someone told her she could. She had changed because someone showed her the possibility, and she chose to embrace it. The encouragement had sparked courage, and the courage had sparked growth. As the weeks passed, Lila's presence became more noticeable in the community. Teachers sought her ideas, younger students looked up to her, and even some peers who had once whispered now approached her with curiosity and respect. She was no longer invisible, but her newfound confidence came not from the approval of others, but from her own understanding of her worth. Even small challenges no longer frightened her as before. A day when a classmate accidentally spilled paint on her drawing would have once caused panic and tears. Now she simply cleaned it up, learned from the mistake, and continued creating. Lila realized that life was full of imperfections, but each mistake offered a chance to grow stronger and wiser. Her creativity expanded beyond art. Lila began writing stories, imagining worlds where people celebrated differences rather than feared them. She shared her work with Ethan, who offered encouragement and feedback, always in a way that uplifted rather than judged. Lila's imagination became a source of joy and strength, a tool to connect with others and explore the limitless possibilities of her mind. By the end of the season, the wild alien girl was no longer a figure of whispers and curiosity. She had become a symbol of courage, imagination, and the power of being seen. One human's belief in her had sparked a transformation that reached far beyond herself, touching the lives of those around her. As she stood by her bedroom window one evening, looking at the glowing horizon, Lila reflected on her journey. She thought about the quiet moments of doubt, the challenges she had faced, and the small victories that had built her confidence. She realized that transformation was not a single event but a journey, a series of steps taken with courage, support, and belief, and deep in her heart, Lila knew that the most important transformation had already happened. She had learned to see herself as worthy, capable, and extraordinary. She had discovered that being different was not a burden but a gift that, when nurtured and shared, could change her life and inspire others. For the first time, Lila truly believed that her life was full of possibility, connection, and hope, and she knew with quiet certainty that her journey was far from over. The world had begun to notice her, but more importantly, she had begun to notice herself. The town had begun to change its view of Lila. The wild alien girl, who had once been ignored, laughed at, or misunderstood, now moved through the streets with a quiet but undeniable presence. People still whispered occasionally, but their words no longer carried the power to hurt her. Lila had changed, and with her transformation the world around her began to notice. It was a sunny afternoon when Lila walked through the town square, carrying a small sketchbook. Children waved at her, teachers smiled, and a few neighbors nodded in quiet acknowledgement. She felt a sense of belonging that had once seemed impossible. Lila had learned that change did not always come quickly, but persistence, courage, and the support of even a single person could create ripples that reached far beyond expectations. Lila's friendship with Ethan had grown deeper over time. He had been there through her struggles, celebrated her victories, and believed in her when no one else would. Together they had explored hidden corners of the town, created stories, and shared ideas. But their connection had also taught Lila a deeper lesson: the power of seeing someone fully without judgment, and offering kindness even when the world did not. One day, the school announced a talent show. Lila hesitated. Public performance had always been intimidating, but she felt a spark of courage she had never known before. Encouraged by Ethan, she decided to participate. She chose to share a story she had written, one inspired by her own experiences, a story about a girl who felt different, misunderstood, and alone, but who found friendship and courage along the way. When the night of the talent show arrived, Lila stepped onto the stage with a mixture of nerves and excitement. The spotlight was bright and dozens of eyes watched her carefully. For a brief moment, she felt the familiar fear of judgment creeping in, but then she remembered the pond, the sketches, the school project, and all the moments when she had faced challenges and grown stronger. She thought of Ethan's unwavering belief in her. With that in mind, she began to read. Her voice was steady, clear, and filled with emotion. She told the story of the girl who had once been invisible, who had discovered the courage to dream, imagine, and be herself. As she spoke, she noticed the audience listening with genuine attention. Some leaned forward in curiosity, some smiled, and a few even wiped away quiet tears. By the time she finished, the applause was warm and enthusiastic. For the first time, Lila felt the full power of being seen and heard. After the talent show, several students approached her to compliment her story. "I never thought about things that way," one said. "Your story made me think differently." Another added, "You're really talented." Lila felt a quiet pride. The recognition was not only for her talent, but also for the courage it had taken to share herself fully with others. Her parents, too, were proud. They had watched Lila grow from a shy, misunderstood child into someone confident, creative, and capable. They realized that their daughter's uniqueness was not a flaw to be fixed, but a gift to be celebrated. For the first time, the walls of misunderstanding between them seemed to dissolve, replaced by mutual respect and admiration. Lila also noticed subtle changes in herself. She no longer doubted her ideas, hesitated to share her thoughts, or feared judgment from others. She had learned resilience, understanding that the world might not always accept her fully, but that her self-worth was not dependent on approval. Her creativity had flourished, her friendships had deepened, and her courage had grown in ways she had never imagined. Ethan remained a central figure in her life. He had never sought attention or recognition for his role in her journey. He simply offered kindness, support, and belief, demonstrating that even one human could make a lasting difference in someone else's life. Lila often reflected on this quietly, realizing that the world could change in small, meaningful ways when people chose to act with compassion. One evening, Lila returned to her secret pond, now a place of reflection and inspiration. The water shimmered in the moonlight, reflecting the sky and her own image. She thought about the journey she had traveled, the loneliness, the whispers, the fear, and the courage it had taken to step into the light. The girl who had once felt invisible now stood tall in her own understanding of herself. She had learned that being different was not a burden but a source of strength, creativity, and inspiration. As she sat by the water, Lila reflected on the lessons she had learned. She realized that life was full of challenges, but also full of small gestures, kindness, and belief that could create profound change. One hand raised in support, one smile, one word of encouragement could ripple through someone's life in ways that were unimaginable. Ethan had shown her this truth, and it had transformed her world completely. Lila also understood the importance of paying it forward. She began helping other children who felt misunderstood, just as she had once felt. She encouraged them to share their ideas, express their creativity, and believe in themselves. She shared her story, not for praise, but to show that even the quietest, most overlooked voices could shine when given recognition and kindness. Over time, the town began to embrace Lila's uniqueness. Teachers encouraged her creativity, peers sought her advice and ideas, and neighbors began to appreciate the quiet strength and insight she brought to the community. Lila had become a living example of transformation, demonstrating that understanding, encouragement, and patience could help someone grow beyond limitations imposed by fear or judgment. In her heart, Lila carried gratitude and hope. She knew that life would continue to present challenges, but she also knew she had the courage and creativity to face them. She had learned that being different was a gift, that human connection could change lives, and that small acts of kindness had the power to create lasting transformations. As she watched the sunset over the hills, Lila smiled. She was no longer the wild alien girl hidden in the shadows. She was a young woman who had faced fear, embraced her uniqueness, and discovered the power of being seen and believed in. The journey had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had led her to a place of self-discovery, connection, and hope. And in that moment, she made a quiet promise to herself. She would continue to live boldly, create freely, and offer kindness and encouragement to others, just as she had received. She had learned that even one human's belief could change a life, and she wanted to be that person for someone else someday. Lila stood up, brushing her hands against her jeans, and looked at the sparkling pond one last time before heading home. The world stretched out before her, full of possibilities, friendships, adventures, and creativity. She knew she had changed, but she also knew the journey was ongoing. Every day was a chance to grow, explore, and inspire. For the first time, Lila felt the quiet certainty that she truly belonged in the world, not by changing herself to fit in, but by being exactly who she was. And with that certainty, she walked forward into the future, ready for whatever life would bring, carrying the lessons of courage, kindness, and belief in her heart forever.